I am Lauren, 26, living a life my family knows nothing about. They think I am still the invisible daughter struggling through college. But I have built a successful tech career, earned more money than they can imagine, and finally found my worth. When my golden sister Amelia's wedding invitation arrived, my father threatened to cut off my tuition if I didn't attend. He had no idea that I had a special envelope prepared that would change everything between us. If you are watching this, let me know where you are from. In the comments, hit subscribe and stay with me through this story of finding strength after years of being overlooked. Growing up as the middle child between my perfect older sister Amelia and my troubled younger brother Tyler was like existing in a shadow. I was neither the shining star nor the problem child who needed attention. I was just Lauren, the quiet one, who blended into the background of our family photos and memories. Our family dynamic shifted dramatically when my mother passed away from cancer when I was 12 years old. Mom had been my advocate, the one who noticed my academic achievements and artistic talents. She would proudly display my perfect report cards and science fair medals alongside Amelia's beauty pageant crowns on the family mantle. After she was gone, those academic trophies gradually disappeared from view, replaced entirely by Amelia's growing collection of social accomplishments. My father, Robert Thompson, was a successful financial advisor who valued appearance and social connections above all else. Tall, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who was used to being respected and obeyed without question. After Mom died, he poured himself into his work and into supporting Amelia, who reminded him most of my mother with her blonde hair and social grace. "Lauren, why can't you be more like your sister?" became a constant refrain in our house. Amelia knows how to make a good impression. Amelia understands the importance of connections. Amelia will marry well. While Amelia was being groomed to be the perfect society wife, I buried myself in books and computers, finding solace in mathematics and coding, where there were clear rules and merit, was based on ability, not appearance. I developed a passion for algorithm development, spending hours creating small programs that could solve increasingly complex problems. But these achievements went largely unnoticed at home. The contrast in how we were treated was never clearer than during our milestone celebrations. For Amelia's Sweet 16, my father rented a ballroom at the Westfield Country Club. 200 guests attended the lavish party with professional decorations, a live band, and a custom ice sculpture of Amelia in her pageant crown. The local newspaper even featured it in the society pages. 2 months later, when my 16th birthday arrived, my father was on a business trip. He left a card with $50 on the kitchen counter with a hastily scribbled note, "Get yourself something nice, Lauren." I spent the evening alone ordering pizza and coding a simple game that I had been working on for months. I cried myself to sleep that night, not because I wanted a fancy party, but because I wanted to matter enough to be remembered. When Amelia graduated high school as homecoming queen with average grades, my father bought her a brand new white BMW convertible with a custom license plate that read Queen A. When I graduated a year later with a perfect 4.0 GPA, and as president of the Computer Science Club, I received a public bus pass and a lecture about responsibility. "College is expensive, Lauren," my father said as he handed me the plastic bus card. "I expect you to be practical about transportation. Your sister needed her car for social engagements that will help her future. You will just be going to classes." Through it all, I developed a quiet determination. If I would never be seen in my own home, I would make sure the world beyond it would eventually notice me. I applied to every scholarship I could find, spending nights filling out applications while Amelia went to parties. I was accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship for computer science, but it wasn't enough to cover all expenses. I would still need my father's financial support to attend. The one person who saw me clearly was my grandmother Martha, my mother's mother. A retired mathematics professor with sharp eyes behind thick glasses, she recognized my abilities long before anyone else did. During holiday gatherings, while everyone fawned over Amelia's latest achievements, Grandma Martha would quietly pull me aside. "Your mind is a gift, Lauren," she would whisper, pressing books about famous female mathematicians and computer scientists into my hands. "Your mother would be so proud of how you are using it." When I showed her my acceptance letter to Princeton, she cried with pride and gave me her old leather briefcase that she had carried throughout her teaching career. "Fill this with world-changing ideas," she said. "That will be a greater legacy than any beauty crown." The night before I left for college, I sat on my bedroom floor looking at the financial aid papers my father had signed with obvious reluctance. The tuition support came with constant reminders of his sacrifice and comparisons to how Amelia's marriage prospects would be a better investment. But I knew this was my only ticket out, my only chance to prove my worth in a world that would value what I could do, rather than how I looked. I packed my bags with a mixture of fear and determination, knowing that once I stepped onto that campus, I would begin building a life that was entirely my own. My first day at Princeton was the first day I felt like I could breathe freely. The campus was buzzing with intellectual energy, and for once, I wasn't the odd one out for being passionate about academics. Still, the transition wasn't easy. My partial scholarship covered tuition, but left little for living expenses, and my father's contribution came with strings attached. "I expect straight A's," he said during our rare phone calls. "Amelia is planning her engagement to Bradley Sullivan. His family owns half the real estate in our county. What connections are you making there?" I didn't tell him that I barely had time for socializing. Between my full course load in computer science and the 3 part-time jobs I juggled, sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded myself. I worked at the campus coffee shop from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., attended classes until 3 p.m., tutored high school students in math until 6 p.m., and then worked remotely doing basic coding for a small web design company until midnight. On weekends, I picked up extra shifts wherever I could. Despite the exhaustion, I maintained a perfect GPA. I lived on ramen noodles and discount grocery items, calculating every penny of my budget with the same precision I applied to my coding projects. My roommate Jasmine, a fashion merchandising major with wealthy parents, often looked at me with a mixture of pity and awe. "Lauren, you need to live a little," she would say, getting ready for another party, while I sat cross-legged on my bed surrounded by textbooks. "College isn't just about grades." "Maybe for you," I would respond with a tired smile. "For me, it's about survival." Everything changed during my junior year when Professor Jenkins, a renowned computer scientist who rarely took interest in undergraduate students, noticed an algorithm I had developed for a class project. It was designed to predict consumer behavior based on minimal data points, creating accurate profiles with far less information than existing models required. After class one day, he asked me to stay behind. A tall man with wild gray hair and perpetually smudged glasses, he had a reputation for being brilliantly intimidating. "Ms. Thompson," he said, studying me with intense focus, "have you considered the commercial applications of your algorithm?" I admitted that I had been too busy trying to survive to think about patents or business potential. Professor Jenkins shook his head in disbelief. "You've created something revolutionary here, and you're worried about making rent." He slid a business card across the table. "Come to my office hours tomorrow. I have some people you should meet." Those people turned out to be Daniel Reeves and Sophia Wang, graduate students, who had been working on complementary technology. Daniel was a cybersecurity specialist with a background in banking, and Sophia was developing user interfaces that could make complex technology accessible to non-technical users. "We've been looking for exactly what you've built," Sophia explained during our first meeting in Professor Jenkins's cluttered office. "With your algorithm, Daniel's security protocols, and my user experience design, we could create something truly groundbreaking." Within a month, the 3 of us had formed Data Mine Solutions with Professor Jenkins as our advisor and minority stakeholder. We worked nights and weekends developing our platform in the unused computer lab in the basement of the science building. By the end of the semester, we had a working prototype that could provide businesses with consumer insights that were 40% more accurate than current market leaders, while using 60% less data. Our breakthrough came when a mid-sized retail chain agreed to pilot our software. The results exceeded even our expectations, increasing their targeted marketing effectiveness by 78%. Word spread quickly in the industry, and by the beginning of my senior year, we had secured our first major contract with a national retail corporation for $1.2 million. I still remember staring at my bank account after that first major deposit, unable to comprehend the sudden change in my financial reality. My share came to just over $300,000. I could have paid off my father's contribution to my education immediately, but something held me back. Years of emotional neglect had taught me to protect myself, and I wasn't ready to reveal my success to a family that had never believed in me. Instead, I continued living as if nothing had changed. I kept all my part-time jobs and my modest lifestyle. I told Jasmine that I had received an anonymous scholarship when she questioned how I was suddenly able to pay rent without stress. The only difference was that I now had a secret emergency fund that gave me a sense of security I had never known before. Throughout my final year at Princeton, DataMine Solutions continued to grow. We hired our first employees and moved into real office space in a small building near campus. I scheduled all business meetings around my classes and jobs, maintaining the facade of the struggling student, while secretly helping to build a company that industry insiders were beginning to notice. As graduation approached, I was selected as the valedictorian of my class, based on my perfect academic record and faculty recommendations. It should have been a moment of triumph, a chance to finally show my father that I was exceptional in my own way. But when he called to discuss attending the ceremony, I made a calculated decision. I can't have anyone at graduation, I lied. They're limiting guests due to space constraints, and I have final exams that conflict with the main ceremony anyway. The truth was that I couldn't bear the thought of my father attending my graduation out of obligation, comparing me unfavorably to Amelia, even in what should have been my moment of achievement. And more practically, I couldn't risk him discovering my business success. I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. So on graduation day, I stood at the podium, giving the valedictorian address to a crowd that included no family members. I spoke about perseverance in finding value within yourself when others fail to see it. As I looked out at the sea of proud parents and siblings supporting my classmates, I felt a pang of sadness for what I had never had, but also pride in what I had accomplished despite it. True success, I concluded in my speech, isn't measured by recognition from others, but by knowing your own worth and living according to your values. Later that evening, as my classmates celebrated with their families, I sat alone in my apartment with my laptop finalizing the details for DataMine's next major contract. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Hope your exams went well. Amelia's boyfriend proposed today with a 3-carat diamond. Family dinner next month to celebrate." I turned off my phone and went back to work knowing that I was building something more valuable than any diamond ring my independence. In the 2 years following my secret graduation, DataMine Solutions transformed from a promising startup into one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the Northeast. Our proprietary consumer behavior algorithm had been refined and expanded, attracting clients from retail giants to healthcare systems to financial institutions. What had begun in a dusty campus basement now occupied 2 floors of a sleek office building in Boston, with a staff of 38 talented developers, analysts, and sales professionals. As the technical genius behind our core product, I was named Chief Technology Officer at the age of 24. My salary jumped to $245,000 annually, with additional stock options that were already worth over $500,000. The invisible middle child, who once counted pennies for ramen noodles, now had a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River. Despite my financial success, old habits died hard. For the first 6 months after graduation, I continued living in my modest student apartment, reluctant to spend money on luxuries after years of scarcity. It was Sophia who finally staged an intervention, showing up at my door with real estate listings. "Lauren, you need a home that matches your life now," she said firmly, "not a shrine to your struggling student days." She was right. I found a beautiful 2-bedroom condominium in Cambridge, with exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, and a kitchen that actually had counter space. I paid cash for it, a transaction that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The day I moved in, I stood in the empty living room, keys in hand, and cried for 10 minutes straight. These walls were mine. This space was mine. For the first time, I had tangible proof that I had built something substantial. I furnished my new home carefully, choosing pieces that brought me joy rather than just serving function. A plush emerald green sofa bookshelves filled with computer science texts and literary classics, an ergonomic desk setup for when I worked from home, and most importantly, a guest room, where my grandmother Martha could stay when she visited. Speaking of grandmother Martha, she was the only family member who knew about my success. During my second year of college, when Datamine secured its first major contract, I had called her in a panic, overwhelmed by the sudden change in my circumstances. "I always knew you would do remarkable things, Lauren," she said, not sounding surprised at all by my news. "Your mother would be bursting with pride." When I received my first substantial paycheck, I arranged for grandmother Martha to receive the best medical care for her advancing arthritis. I also set up a comfortable monthly stipend that allowed her to retire fully from the part-time teaching she had been doing to supplement her modest pension. She protested at first, but I insisted. "You believed in me when no one else did," I told her. "Let me take care of you now." Beyond caring for grandmother Martha, I discovered the joy of quiet philanthropy. I anonymously established the Elizabeth Thompson Memorial Scholarship at Princeton, named after my mother specifically for female students in STEM fields who demonstrated financial need. Each year, I would receive a letter from the university about how the scholarship had been awarded, and I would smile knowing that another young woman would not have to work 3 jobs while pursuing her education. As my external circumstances improved, I also began the internal work of healing from years of emotional neglect. At Sophia's recommendation, I started seeing Dr. Rivera, a therapist specializing in family trauma and adult children of emotionally absent parents. Our weekly sessions were often painful but transformative. Your worth was never dependent on your father's ability to see it. Dr. Rivera would remind me when I fell into old patterns of seeking validation through achievement. And your success now isn't revenge. It's simply you becoming who you were always meant to be. Through therapy, I began developing genuine friendships for the first time. Without the constant stress of survival and the protective walls I had built around myself, I could finally be vulnerable enough to let people in. Daniel and Sophia from Datamind became more than business partners. They became my chosen family. I also connected with other tech entrepreneurs through industry events, forming a supportive network of brilliant, driven individuals who valued me for my mind and character. My relationship with my immediate family, however, remained distant and superficial. I maintained the minimum contact necessary to avoid questions, sending generic birthday and holiday cards, and making brief, infrequent phone calls. To my father and siblings, I was still just Lauren the college student, now supposedly in graduate school, still dependent on occasional financial support that I never actually needed or used. I tucked these checks into a separate account, never cashed, keeping meticulous records of every cent my father thought he was contributing to my education. During these 2 years, my sister Amelia's life proceeded exactly as planned. She became engaged to Jackson Wellington III, heir to the Wellington Hotel chain, and exactly the kind of socially prominent catch my father had groomed her to attract. Their relationship seemed based more on mutual social benefit than genuine connection, but Amelia appeared satisfied with the arrangement. My brother Tyler continued his pattern of minor troublemaking and underachievement, occasionally landing in enough difficulty to divert family attention, but never enough to require serious intervention. I had found peace in my independence, building a life that felt authentic and meaningful. I had friends who knew the real me work that challenged and fulfilled me, and the financial freedom to make choices based on desire rather than necessity. I had made a deliberate decision to maintain emotional distance from my family, protecting the sense of self-worth I had worked so hard to develop. Then on a crisp fall morning, as I reviewed code in my office, my assistant placed a cream-colored envelope on my desk. The heavy stock paper and gold-embossed lettering immediately signaled its purpose. Before I even read the flowing script, Amelia Grace Thompson and Jackson Edward Wellington III requested the honor of my presence at their wedding, 3 months hence at the Wellington Estate in Newport, Rhode Island. I set the invitation aside, assuming I would send my regrets along with an appropriately generous gift. I had no desire to step back into the family dynamics I had so carefully escaped to once again be invisible Lauren in a crowd celebrating Golden Amelia. But fate and my father had other plans. The wedding invitation sat on my desk for a week before I finally drafted a polite response declining to attend. I selected an expensive item from their registry, a crystal vase from Tiffany that cost more than my monthly rent during college to be delivered with my best wishes. I felt a momentary pang of guilt for not being present at my sister's milestone event, but rationalized that my absence would go largely unnoticed in the whirlwind celebration of the social wedding of the season. That comfortable assumption was shattered when my phone rang with my father's name flashing on the screen. Calls from him were rare enough that I knew immediately something was wrong. Taking a deep breath, I answered with forced brightness. "Hi, Dad, how are you?" "Lauren." His voice was cold and clipped the tone he used when he was deeply disappointed, but controlling his temper. "I just received a call from Amelia. She said you declined her wedding invitation." I maintained my composure, switching into the professional tone I used for difficult business negotiations. "Yes, I sent my response yesterday. Unfortunately, I have commitments that weekend that I cannot reschedule. I've sent a gift from their registry that should be arriving soon." "Commitments," he practically spat the word. "What commitment could possibly be more important than your sister's wedding? This is the most significant day of Amelia's life, and the Wellingtons are expecting our entire family to be present and accounted for. Do you understand what connections like these mean for all of us?" I bit back the retort that immediately sprang to mind about how little the Wellingtons' connections would impact my already successful life. Instead, I tried again for diplomacy. "I understand it's important, Dad, but my academic schedule is extremely demanding right now, and I've already paid for a conference that weekend that's critical for my research." The lies came easily after years of maintaining my cover story. "Listen to me carefully, Lauren." His voice dropped to that dangerous quiet that I remembered from childhood disappointments. "I have supported you through years of endless education with very little to show for it. I am still paying your tuition and living expenses, while Amelia has found success the proper way, by making an advantageous match with an appropriate young man from a good family." I gripped the phone tighter as he continued. "If you cannot fulfill this one family obligation, this one simple showing of support for your sister, then perhaps it's time I reconsidered my financial support of your apparently never-ending education." My heart raced, even as I recognized the absurdity of the threat. He had no power over me anymore, hadn't for years. But the old fear response was automatic and visceral. "Are you threatening to cut off my tuition if I don't attend Amelia's wedding?" I asked, wanting to hear him say it explicitly. "I'm saying that family support goes both ways, Lauren. I have carried you financially for years while you pursue these academic interests. The least you can do is show up for one day to support your sister. If that's too much to ask, then yes, perhaps my financial support has been taken for granted and should be reconsidered." In that moment, something shifted inside me. After years of hiding my success of playing small to avoid conflict, I suddenly saw with perfect clarity that it was time for the truth. Not in anger or as revenge, but simply because living authentically had become more important than avoiding confrontation. "I see," I said calmly. "In that case, I'll be at the wedding." I could hear the surprise and satisfaction in his voice. "Good, I'm glad you've come to your senses. The Wellingtons have reserved the entire Newport Grand Hotel for out-of-town guests. I'll tell Amelia's wedding planner to add you back to the seating chart." After hanging up, I sat motionless in my ergonomic office chair, staring out at the Boston skyline as I contemplated what I had just committed to. I wasn't just agreeing to attend a wedding. I was deciding to reveal my true self to my family after years of deception. The thought was terrifying, but also strangely liberating. That evening, I had an emergency session with Dr. Rivera explaining the situation and my conflicted feelings. "What are you afraid will happen if they learn the truth?" she asked, her gentle voice guiding me toward insight rather than telling me what to do. I considered carefully before answering. "I'm afraid they'll somehow take credit for my success, that my father will rewrite history to make it seem like he supported me all along. Or worse, that they'll dismiss what I've accomplished as not as valuable as Amelia's social achievements." Dr. Rivera nodded thoughtfully. "Those are legitimate concerns based on your experience with your family. But I'm curious, Lauren, how long were you planning to maintain this deception?" "Another year. 5 years the rest of your life." Put that way, the answer was obvious. The dual life I had been leading was unsustainable and increasingly unhealthy. It was time for integration, for bringing my authentic self home, regardless of how it might be received. Over the next week, I carefully prepared for what I had come to think of as my unveiling. I compiled documentation of my academic and professional achievements, my valedictorian certificate bank statements showing my current wealth, the company prospectus naming me as CTO and co-founder, and proof that I had been setting aside every cent my father thought he was contributing to my education with interest. Most importantly, I wrote a letter explaining my feelings and decisions over the years. It was not accusatory or bitter, but honest about the pain of growing up invisible and how I had found strength in building a life on my own terms. I concluded with an olive branch, an opening for a new kind of relationship based on mutual respect rather than dependency or obligation. I placed all these documents in a sleek leather portfolio, the kind used for important business contracts. This was in many ways a negotiation of a new family contract, and I would approach it with the same professionalism I brought to my work. As the wedding date approached, I also prepared myself practically for the event. I purchased a sophisticated designer dress in deep emerald green that complemented my brown hair and eyes, a subtle contrast to the pastels that would likely dominate the bridal party. I booked appointments for professional hairstyling and subtle makeup. I reserved my own room at the Newport Grand Hotel, separate from the family block, giving myself a private retreat if needed. The night before I was scheduled to leave for Newport, I received a text from my father. "Confirm you're still coming. Amelia is counting on full family attendance. Seating arrangements finalized tomorrow." I typed back a simple response. "I'll be there." What he didn't know was that I would be arriving not as the Lauren he thought he knew, but as the woman I had become, portfolio in hand, ready to rewrite our family narrative on my own terms. The drive to Newport took just under 2 hours from my Cambridge apartment, giving me ample time to rehearse what I would say when I finally revealed my truth to my family. The closer I got to the coastal town, the more my stomach tightened with anxiety, but also with a strange sense of anticipation. After years of hiding, there was relief in the prospect of finally being seen. Newport in early June was picture perfect, with sailboats dotting the harbor and historic mansions standing proud against the blue sky. The Wellington estate was one of the most impressive of these Gilded Age remnants, a sprawling property with manicured gardens sloping down to the ocean. As I navigated the winding driveway in my modest but new Audi, I noted the fleet of luxury vehicles already parked for the rehearsal dinner, my father's black Mercedes among them. Rather than joining the family gathering immediately, I checked into the Newport Grand Hotel, a recently renovated 5-star property, where a standard room cost more per night than my entire monthly budget during college. The reservation clerk raised an eyebrow when I requested a room not in the Thompson-Wellington wedding block. "You're with the wedding party, Ms. Thompson," she asked, noting my last name. "I'm the bride's sister," I confirmed, "but I prefer my own accommodations, thank you." My room overlooked the harbor, providing a tranquil view that helped calm my nerves as I prepared for the evening's rehearsal dinner. I took my time getting ready, transforming myself into a polished professional woman, far removed from the invisible middle child of my youth. My hair, once perpetually pulled back in a practical ponytail, now fell in soft waves around my shoulders. My wardrobe of practical basics had been replaced by a tailored navy dress that subtly conveyed success without ostentation. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself compared to the Lauren who had left for college 8 years ago. It wasn't just the external changes, but the confidence in my posture, the direct gaze that no longer dropped to avoid attention. I was ready. The rehearsal dinner was held in the Wellington Estates Conservatory, a glass structure filled with exotic plants and twinkling lights. I arrived precisely on time, neither early enough to be caught alone with family members, nor late enough to create a disruption. As I handed my car to the valet and approached the entrance, I spotted a familiar figure waiting nervously by the door. "Tyler." I called to my younger brother, surprised to see him alone rather than with our father. He turned and for a moment didn't seem to recognize me. Then his eyes widened. "Lauren, wow, you look different." At 24, Tyler had matured since I'd last seen him. The rebellious teenager had been replaced by a young man in an ill-fitting suit, his tie slightly askew as if he'd been fidgeting with it. Unlike Amelia and me, who had inherited our mother's fair features, Tyler resembled our father with his darker coloring and strong jaw, though his eyes held a vulnerability our father never showed. "You too," I said, giving him an awkward hug. "It's been, what, 2 years? 3, he corrected. Christmas before last. I got kicked out of state, and Dad refused to let me come home for holidays after that." There was no bitterness in his tone, just a matter-of-fact acceptance that surprised me. "I'm working construction now, got my own place. Small, but it's mine." I felt a pang of guilt for having lost touch with him. While I had been building my empire and healing my wounds, Tyler had apparently been fighting his own battles without support. "That's great," I said sincerely. "We should catch up properly. Are you dreading this as much as I am?" His laugh was unexpected. "More. Dad's been on the warpath all day. Apparently the florist delivered cream roses instead of pure white for some arrangement. You'd think it was a national security threat." Before I could respond, the conservatory doors opened, and Amelia herself appeared, looking every inch the society bride in a champagne-colored cocktail dress, her blonde hair arranged in an elegant updo adorned with small pearls. "There you are, Tyler Dad's looking everywhere for, Her voice trailed off as she noticed me. "Lauren, you actually came." "Hello, Amelia," I said, stepping forward to kiss her cheek. "Congratulations on your engagement. The venue is beautiful." She seemed momentarily flustered by my appearance, and composure, clearly having expected the same awkward, plainly dressed sister she remembered. "Thank you. I'm surprised you could get away from your studies. Dad said you almost didn't come." "I rearranged some things," I said simply. "It's not every day my sister gets married." Amelia's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together slightly, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "Well, you're here now. Come in, everyone's waiting. The Wellington's second cousins from Boston just arrived too, and Jackson wants to introduce everyone before dinner." The next hour was a blur of introductions and small talk. Jackson Wellington III turned out to be a pleasant, if somewhat bland young man who seemed genuinely fond of Amelia, which was more than I had expected. His parents, however, had the calculated warmth of people evaluating everything and everyone for their social worth. "So, Lauren," Mrs. Wellington said during a momentary lull in conversation, "Amelia mentions you're still in school. What are you studying again?" "Something with computers." Before I could answer, my father appeared at my elbow, his grip on his whiskey glass betraying tension despite his social smile. "Lauren is our perpetual scholar," he said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Still working on advanced degrees while the rest of us are out in the real world, aren't you, Lauren?" I met his gaze directly. "Actually, I've been meaning to update you on my professional situation, Dad. Perhaps we could speak privately after dinner." Something in my tone must have alerted him that this wasn't the meek response he expected, because his expression flickered briefly before he recovered. "Of course, but tonight is about Amelia and Jackson. Your academic updates can wait." Throughout dinner, I observed my father holding court at the head table, bragging about Amelia's accomplishments, and the brilliant match she had made, occasionally making dismissive comments about Lauren's endless schooling, whenever conversation turned my way. I ate quietly, letting him believe for a few more hours that I was still the daughter he thought he knew. As the evening wound down, I overheard him speaking to Jackson's father, not realizing I was within earshot around the corner of the terrace. "My Amelia has always understood what matters in life," he was saying. "Beauty, social grace, making the right connections. Not like Lauren, always with her nose in books, spending years in school with nothing practical to show for it. I'm still supporting her, you know. At some point, you have to wonder if all that education is worth the investment." Mr. Wellington made some murmured response I couldn't catch, but my father continued. "Well, at least I'll have one successful daughter after tomorrow. The Amelia Wellington has a much better ring to it than Dr. Lauren Thompson, don't you think? If she ever finishes that degree, that is." I slipped away before I could be discovered, returning to my hotel room to make final preparations for the next day. I reviewed the contents of my portfolio one last time, ensuring every document was in order. I wasn't out to humiliate my father or ruin Amelia's wedding, but I was done being diminished and misrepresented. That night, I called Grandmother Martha, who had been unable to travel for the wedding due to her health. Are you ready, my dear? She asked, her voice frail, but her mind as sharp as ever. I think so, I said, watching the moonlight on the harbor waters. I'm not doing this out of spite, Grandma. I just can't keep living a divided life. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become, she said. Not because of your success, though that's wonderful too, but because you're finally standing in your truth. That takes more courage than any business achievement. Her words stayed with me as I prepared for bed, setting out my emerald dress for the following day. Tomorrow, Lauren Thompson, CTO and self-made woman, would finally come home not seeking approval or validation, but simply claiming her rightful place in her own family narrative. The morning of Amelia's wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect June day that wedding planners dream about. I woke early, my body tense with anticipation of the confrontation to come. After a light breakfast and a brisk walk along the harbor to clear my head, I began preparing for the 2 p.m. ceremony. The emerald green dress I had chosen fell just below my knees, its simple elegance a contrast to the elaborate gowns I knew would dominate the wedding. I paired it with understated jewelry and nude heels, wanting to look polished, but not as if I was trying to outshine the bride. My hair was styled in loose waves, my makeup natural, but flawless. The overall effect was of quiet confidence, rather than flashy display. Most importantly, I tucked the leather portfolio containing my documents into a matching clutch. Today was the day for truth, and I was prepared. I arrived at the Wellington estate an hour before the ceremony, watching as the final preparations came together on the grand lawn overlooking the Atlantic. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows, an elaborate floral arch marking where Amelia and Jackson would exchange vows. Staff in formal uniforms scurried about adjusting flower arrangements and straightening place cards with military precision. As family of the bride, I was directed to a luxurious sitting room in the main house where Amelia was getting ready with her bridesmaids. I hesitated at the door, uncertain of my welcome in this inner sanctum of femininity, where I had always felt out of place. Before I could decide whether to enter, my father emerged from an adjacent room, stopping short when he saw me. "Lauren," he said, his eyes quickly assessing my appearance. "You're early." "Hello, Dad," I replied calmly. I wanted to make sure I had time to wish Amelia well before things get hectic. He nodded, then gestured toward a small study across the hall. "Come in here for a moment. I want to speak with you privately." The wood-paneled room was clearly Mr. Wellington's domain, with leather-bound books lining the walls and hunting trophies displayed prominently. My father closed the door behind us, his expression shifting from public cordiality to stern authority. "I want to be very clear about my expectations today," he began without preamble. "This is Amelia's day, and nothing is going to detract from that. The Wellingtons are extremely particular about appearances, and this wedding represents a significant connection for our family." I remained silent, letting him continue his lecture. "You will smile, be gracious, and keep any academic talk to a minimum. No one wants to hear about computer algorithms during a wedding celebration." He straightened his already perfect tie, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. "And I expect you to show proper gratitude when the Wellingtons inevitably ask about your studies. Without my financial support, you wouldn't be able to pursue this extended education of yours." It was the perfect opening. I took a deep breath, centering myself as I had learned to do before important business presentations. "About that financial support, Dad," I said, opening my clutch and removing the leather portfolio. "I think it's time we clarified a few things." His eyebrows drew together in confusion as I handed him the envelope containing the documentation of my life. "What's this, the truth?" I said simply. "Something that's long overdue." With obvious reluctance, he opened the portfolio and began examining the contents. I watched his expression transform as he moved from document to document, confusion giving way to disbelief, and then something approaching shock. First was my Princeton valedictorian certificate, complete with the date of graduation 4 years earlier. "This must be a mistake," he muttered. "You're still in graduate school." "No, Dad. I graduated 4 years ago. I've never been in graduate school." His hands trembled slightly as he continued to the bank statements showing my current net worth and salary. This can't be right," he said, looking up at me with genuine bewilderment. "These figures are accurate," I finished for him. I co-founded a tech company during my junior year at Princeton. I'm the chief technology officer. Those are my earnings and assets. Next came the company prospectus with my name and title clearly displayed, followed by the business profiles that had been published in technology magazines and websites. His face paled as he continued reading. All this time, he whispered more to himself than to me. All this time you've been successful, I supplied, on my own terms, in my own way. The final document was the record of every check he had written for what he believed was my ongoing education, along with a cashier's check returning the full amount plus interest. I never cashed any of your checks after my graduation, I explained quietly. I didn't need the money, but I wasn't ready for this conversation. I kept the pretense because it was easier than confronting the fact that you never saw my worth. He stared at the check, then back at me, his face unreadable. Why reveal this now? Why here at Amelia's wedding? Because you threatened to cut off my tuition if I didn't attend. It made me realize how tired I am of living a lie. I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I'm not here to create drama or steal Amelia's spotlight. I just want to attend my sister's wedding as myself, not the failure you've always assumed I was. I pointed to the letter at the back of the portfolio. That explains everything my feelings and decisions over the years. I'd appreciate if you'd read it when you have time to really consider what I'm saying. Before he could respond, the door opened, and Amelia stood there in her wedding gown, a vision in white satin and lace that had probably cost more than most people's cars. Her expression was thunderous, her carefully applied makeup not quite hiding the flush of anger on her cheeks. "What is going on in here?" she demanded. "Dad the photographer is waiting for family portraits, and you're hiding in Uncle Edward's study with Lauren." She spat my name like it was distasteful, her gaze dropping to the documents spread across the desk between us. "What are those? Please tell me Lauren isn't bringing up some academic crisis on my wedding day." My father seemed unable to find his voice, still staring at the evidence of my secret life. I turned to face my sister directly. "It's not a crisis, Amelia. Just a long overdue truth that Dad needed to hear. It won't impact your wedding in any way." She stepped closer, her curiosity overcoming her irritation as she caught sight of the figures on one of the bank statements. "What is this? Why do you have so much money?" I finished for her. Because contrary to what everyone in this family believes, I've been quite successful. I own a technology company. I'm here today as your sister, who wants to celebrate your happiness, not as the family charity case. Amelia's perfectly glossed mouth opened and closed without sound, her worldview visibly rearranging itself as she processed this information. My father finally found his voice. "Amelia, sweetheart, go back to your bridesmaids. The photographer can wait a few minutes. Lauren and I need to finish our discussion." "No," Amelia said, her voice taking on the petulant tone I remembered from childhood demands. "It's my wedding day, and I want to know what's going on." Lauren shows up looking completely different with some mysterious documents, and suddenly you're both ignoring the schedule that we've planned for months. I could see the situation spiraling toward exactly the kind of drama I had hoped to avoid. With the practiced calm I used during tense business negotiations, I intervened. "Amelia, you're right. Today is your day, and nothing should distract from that," I said, gathering the documents and returning them to the portfolio. The short version is that I graduated from college years ago, started a successful company, and have been financially independent ever since. I've been letting Dad believe I was still in school because it was easier than confronting old family dynamics. I turned to my father. "We can discuss this further after the wedding. For now, let's focus on Amelia and Jackson's celebration as planned." My father nodded stiffly, his expression still shell-shocked. Amelia, however, wasn't ready to let go. In her world, attention always belonged to her, and my unexpected revelation was clearly threatening that natural order. "So what, you've been pretending to be poor while secretly being rich? Is this some kind of weird revenge plot? Showing up at my wedding to announce you're what, a secret millionaire or something?" The absurdity of her accusation almost made me laugh. "This isn't about you, Amelia. It never was. I'm not here to compete with you or steal your spotlight. I just wanted to stop living a lie." From the hallway, a wedding planner's voice called urgently, "Ms. Thompson, the photographer really needs the family now. The lighting is perfect for the pre-ceremony shots." Amelia looked torn between continuing our confrontation and adhering to her meticulously planned schedule. Ultimately, the bride won out. "This isn't over," she warned, gathering her elaborate train. "But I have a wedding to attend. Try not to drop any more family bombshells before I say I do, would you?" She swept out, leaving my father and me alone again. He stood slowly, straightening his shoulders, as if physically trying to regain his authority. "We will discuss this after the ceremony," he said, his voice regaining some of its usual command. "But for now, we will play our parts for the Wellingtons and their guests. Is that understood?" I nodded, having already achieved my primary objective. The truth was out, the weight lifted. How they chose to respond was their decision, not mine. As we walked toward the garden, where the photographer was arranging the family, my father kept glancing at me as if seeing a stranger. In many ways, that was accurate. The Lauren he thought he knew had never really existed, and the woman walking beside him was indeed a stranger to him, one of my own creation. The photographer directed us to our positions, Amelia radiant in the center, my father proud beside her and me, for once fully visible and standing tall. The wedding ceremony proceeded with the precision of a military operation, every detail executed flawlessly against the backdrop of Newport's shimmering coastline. Amelia was genuinely beautiful as she glided down the aisle on our father's arm, her happiness evident despite the tension that had preceded the ceremony. Jackson looked appropriately awestruck as his bride approached, and the gathered society elite of New England sighed appreciatively at the perfect tableau. I sat quietly in the family section, neither hiding nor drawing attention to myself. Several times during the proceedings, I caught my father glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, something between confusion and reassessment. Amelia, to her credit, focused entirely on her groom and the carefully choreographed vows they exchanged, though her rigid posture suggested she hadn't forgotten our earlier confrontation. As the newlyweds processed back down the aisle, amid a shower of rose petals, I felt a strange sense of peace. The revelation of my truth hadn't gone as dramatically as I had feared, nor as smoothly as I had hoped, but it was done. Whatever came next, I would face it as my authentic self. The reception was held in an enormous tent on the estate's lawn crystal chandeliers, hanging from the peaked ceiling, and tables adorned with elaborate white floral arrangements. I was seated at the extended family table rather than the main family table, a pointed relegation that might once have hurt, but now struck me as childishly petty. Throughout the evening, I noticed whispers and glances in my direction from various wedding guests. Word had clearly spread that something was amiss with the Middle Thompson daughter, though the exact nature of the gossip remained unclear. I maintained my composure, engaging politely with those seated near me and declining all alcoholic beverages to ensure I remained clear-headed. After the cake cutting and first dance, as the celebration hit its full stride, my phone vibrated with a text message. To my surprise, it was from Tyler. "Meet me on the East Terrace. Need to talk." I slipped away from the reception, finding my brother leaning against the stone balustrade overlooking the illuminated gardens. He had loosened his tie and held a half-empty glass of whiskey, but his eyes were clear and focused. "So," he said as I approached, "secret tech millionaire. Huh, gotta say sis didn't see that coming." I laughed despite myself. "Word travels fast." "Amelia's bridesmaids aren't exactly the soul of discretion," he replied with a shrug. "Plus, I overheard Dad on the phone with his financial advisor asking about technology stocks and something called data mine solutions. That you—" I nodded, leaning beside him against the cool stone. "Co-founder and CTO. We develop predictive behavior algorithms for retail and healthcare applications." Tyler whistled low. "And all this time we thought you were just the boring academic one." "That was rather the point," I admitted. "It was easier to let you all believe what you always had than to fight for recognition." He was quiet for a moment, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I get it. Easier to exceed non-existent expectations than to constantly fall short of impossible ones." The insight surprised me, revealing a depth to my brother I hadn't recognized before. "Is that what happened with you? The trouble at school, the rebellion?" Tyler's laugh held little humor. "When your choices are being the disappointing son or the invisible one, at least disappointment gets you noticed." He took a sip of his drink. "After you left for college, it was just me, Dad, and Amelia. Talk about a no-win situation. For the first time, I considered how my strategic retreat from family life might have affected my younger brother. While I had been building my empire and healing my wounds, Tyler had been left to navigate the dysfunctional family dynamics alone. I'm sorry, Tyler. I should have stayed in better touch. He shrugged again, but his expression softened. You did what you had to do. We all did. He hesitated, then asked, So what happens now? You going back to your secret life after dropping this bombshell? It was a question I had been asking myself throughout the evening. What did I want for my family now that the truth was out? I'm not sure, I answered honestly. I don't need anything from Dad anymore, financially or otherwise. I've built a good life for myself. But I've been thinking about Grandmother Martha, how she's getting older, and how family can mean different things than what I experienced growing up. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. She always believed in both of us, didn't she? Only one who ever really saw me too. Maybe, I suggested cautiously. We could start there, you and me and Grandma Martha. See what family could be when it's built on mutual respect instead of expectations and disappointments. Before Tyler could respond, a commotion from the reception tent caught our attention. My father's voice, louder than appropriate for the setting, carried across the terrace. Enough, Amelia. This is not the time or place for this discussion. Moments later, he emerged from the tent, his face flushed with either anger or embarrassment, possibly both. He stopped short when he saw Tyler and me standing together. Well, he said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion, isn't this cozy? My two disappointments commiserating while Amelia's special day falls apart. Tyler tensed beside me, but I placed a calming hand on his arm. What's happened, Dad? My father straightened his already perfect tie, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood. Your sister is upset. Apparently, her perfect wedding has been overshadowed by whispers about her secretive sister's mysterious wealth. She seems to think you planned it this way. That's ridiculous, I replied evenly. I specifically waited until after the ceremony to avoid exactly this scenario. If there are whispers, they're coming from you or Amelia, not me. He didn't respond directly, instead looking out over the darkened gardens. All these years, he said finally, I thought I knew what was best for all of you. Amelia needed social connections and beauty to succeed in life. Tyler needed discipline and structure. And you, Lauren, you needed practical direction to balance your academic tendencies. He turned back to face me, his expression more vulnerable than I had ever seen it. But it seems I didn't know any of you at all. It was as close to an admission of failure as I had ever heard from my father, and it caught me off guard. Before I could formulate a response, Amelia appeared in the terrace doorway, her wedding gown slightly disheveled and her carefully applied makeup smudged from either tears or anger. There you all are, she said, her voice brittle, having a little family reunion without the bride. How typical. Tyler muttered something under his breath about drama queens, but I stepped forward, determined to defuse the situation before it escalated further. Amelia, I'm genuinely sorry if my presence has caused any disruption to your wedding. That was never my intention. My sister's laugh was harsh and unfamiliar. Your intention? You show up looking like that, revealing you've been lying to everyone for years and expect us to believe you didn't want to steal attention? Please. That's enough, my father interjected, surprising us all. Amelia Lauren came here today at my insistence under threat of financial consequences that it turns out were meaningless. If anyone is at fault for this situation, it's me, not her. The acknowledgement hung in the air between us, unexpected and transformative. For perhaps the first time in our lives, our father was seeing us as we truly were, not as the roles he had assigned us in his narrative of family success. Amelia seemed momentarily deflated by his words, her anger giving way to confusion. I don't understand what's happening. Everything was perfect. The wedding, the connections with the Wellingtons, my future. And now it's all complicated. I recognized in that moment how similar we actually were, my sister and I. Both of us had been shaped by our father's expectations, just in different directions. While I had rebelled by succeeding on my own terms, Amelia had internalized his values so completely that she couldn't imagine a different measure of worth. Life is complicated, Amelia, I said gently. But your wedding is still beautiful. Your husband seems to genuinely love you, and the Wellingtons are still gaining you as a daughter-in-law. Nothing fundamental has changed except your understanding of who I am." Tyler stepped forward, placing an arm around each of us, in an awkward but well-intentioned gesture. "Look at that, the Thompson siblings all in one place without bloodshed. Jackson should be photographing this rare event instead of dancing with his cousins." The absurdity of the situation struck us all simultaneously, and to my amazement, Amelia actually laughed a genuine sound I hadn't heard from her in years. "God, we're a mess, aren't we?" she said, smoothing her dress. "The picture-perfect family that's anything but." "Maybe that's okay," I suggested. "Maybe real families are supposed to be a little messy." My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, but making an effort nonetheless. "Lauren, I'd like to see more of those documents, understand what you've built. Perhaps we could meet for lunch next week." It wasn't an apology or even a complete acknowledgement of his mistakes, but it was a beginning. A small crack in the rigid facade that had defined our family dynamics for as long as I could remember. "I'd like that," I said simply. Amelia straightened her shoulders, the perfect bride persona reasserting itself. "I should get back. People will wonder where I've gone." As she turned to leave, she paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "The green was a good choice. The color, for your dress. It, it suits you." Coming from Amelia, the fashion expert, it was perhaps the closest thing to approval she could offer. I accepted it with a nod and a small smile. We returned to the reception separately, the confrontation over, but its effects rippling through us in ways that would take time to fully understand. I stayed for another hour making polite conversation and avoiding further drama before quietly slipping away to my hotel room. As I drove back to Boston the following morning, the Atlantic coastline gleaming in my rearview mirror, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth once spoken had created space for something new to grow, something that might with time and care resemble the family I had always wanted. 6 months after Amelia's wedding, I sat in the sunlit dining room of Riverside Meadows, an upscale retirement community just outside Boston. Across from me, Grandmother Martha carefully arranged her napkin on her lap, her arthritic hands moving with deliberate precision. "Lauren, dear," she said, her voice thin, but her eyes as sharp as ever. "You look tired. Are you working too hard again?" I smiled, touched by her concern. "Just the usual end-of-quarter rush at work. We're launching a new healthcare application that can predict patient outcomes with 40% more accuracy than current systems. It could genuinely save lives." Grandmother Martha nodded approvingly. "Your mother would have been so proud. Not just of what you've accomplished, but of the woman you've become." The mention of my mother brought a familiar pang of loss, but also a warm sense of connection. I had recently discovered an old photo album in Grandmother Martha's belongings, showing my mother at my age, focused intently on a complex mathematical equation at her university desk. The physical resemblance was striking, but more compelling was the recognition of her intellectual passion mirrored in my own life choices. "Have you heard from your father this week?" Grandmother Martha asked, adding a precise half-teaspoon of sugar to her tea. "We had lunch on Tuesday," I confirmed. "He brought the quarterly reports from his investment portfolio and wanted my opinion on his technology holdings." The evolution of my relationship with my father had been slow and occasionally awkward, but undeniably real. After the wedding revelation, he had indeed followed through on his suggestion of lunch, which had turned into a 3-hour conversation about my company, my education, and eventually tentatively our relationship. Robert Thompson was not a man given to emotional declarations or apologies, but he had shown his shifting perspective in other ways, seeking my professional advice and actually listening to my opinions. And Amelia, how is married life treating our society bride? Grandmother Martha had always seen through Amelia's perfect facade with the same clarity she had recognized my hidden potential. She and Jackson are back from their extended honeymoon world tour. She's renovating their Newport mansion and has surprisingly started a small foundation supporting arts education in underserved communities. I still found this development somewhat astonishing. I think she's trying to find something meaningful beyond being Mrs. Wellington. My grandmother's smile held a hint of satisfaction. People can surprise you if you give them the chance, Lauren. Even those who seem most rigidly defined by their roles. This wisdom applied equally to my brother Tyler, who had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation since the wedding confrontation. The text message he had sent me that night had been the beginning of a genuine reconnection. We now spoke weekly, and I had helped him secure a position in Datamine's operations department, where his practical problem-solving abilities had quickly earned him recognition and promotion. Most significantly, I had helped him enroll in night classes at Boston University, where he was steadily working toward a business degree with a focus on logistics management. The invisible middle child had recognized a kindred spirit in the troublemaking younger brother, both of us having been miscast in our family's narrative. "I've been thinking," I said, returning to my tea, "about buying a house. Something with enough space for weekend visits from family. Maybe on the coast halfway between Boston and Newport, to make it convenient for everyone." Grandmother Martha's eyes twinkled with understanding. "Building a new center for the Thompson family, are you on neutral territory?" I laughed at her perceptiveness. "Something like that. A place where we can create new traditions, new memories, where the old roles don't have to define us." The healing process hadn't been without setbacks. There had been tense holiday gatherings, uncomfortable conversations, and moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. Amelia occasionally slipped into competitive behavior. My father sometimes fell back on authoritative pronouncements, and I wasn't immune to defensive withdrawal when feeling undervalued. But each time we had found our way back to the new understanding that had begun on that Newport terrace. We were learning imperfectly but genuinely to see each other as we truly were, rather than as the characters in our father's success narrative. My professional life continued to flourish alongside this personal growth. Data Mine Solutions had recently been valued at over $200 million, with our technology being adapted for applications ranging from retail to healthcare to transportation logistics. I had been featured in Forbes' 40 Under 40 list and guest lectured at my alma mater on ethical applications of predictive algorithms. But these external validations, once so important to my sense of self-worth, had become secondary to the internal peace I had found. I no longer needed success to prove my value to myself or to my family. I pursued excellence because it was intrinsically satisfying and because our work genuinely helped people, not as a shield against childhood wounds. "You know what the greatest gift of wealth is, Lauren?" Grandmother Martha asked, interrupting my reflections. I raised an eyebrow, curious about her perspective. "What's that, Grandma?" "The freedom to define success on your own terms," she said, her wise eyes holding mine. "Not in dollars or titles, but in the quality of your relationships and the integrity of your choices." As I drove back to my Cambridge condominium that evening, I reflected on how far I had come from the invisible middle child desperate for validation. The envelope I had handed my father at Amelia's wedding had contained more than just documentation of my financial success. It had held the key to my emotional freedom, releasing me from the need for external approval. The journey hadn't ended that day, of course. True healing was an ongoing process requiring conscious effort and regular recommitment. There were still moments when old insecurities surfaced, when I questioned my worth beyond my achievements. But increasingly, those moments were outnumbered by times of genuine self-acceptance and connection with others. I had learned that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean dramatic confrontation or complete separation. Sometimes it means quietly insisting on your truth, making space for authentic relationships to develop on new terms. Sometimes it means extending the same compassion to others that you wish had been extended to you. My phone pinged with a group text from Tyler to the newly created Thompson siblings chat. "Dad just asked if we're all free for dinner next Sunday. Says he has something important to discuss. Should we be worried?" Amelia responded immediately. "Probably wants to lecture us about proper investment strategies again. I'll be there if Lauren promises to bring those amazing cookies from that bakery near her office." I smiled, typing my reply, "Deal, and no need to worry. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. That's what family does." Have you ever had to stand up to family expectations to be true to yourself? Share your story in the comments. If you found value in my journey, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of finding strength through difficult family dynamics. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be authentically you, even when others aren't ready to see it. Thank you for listening, and I wish you courage on your own path to self acceptance.